Imagine coming home after years of service, trusting the person you loved more than anyone, only to discover that the person you trusted most has betrayed you with your own brother. I'm Jake, a military veteran, and what I saw that night in a motel room changed everything. This is a story of betrayal, of secrets hidden in plain sight, and the quiet, deliberate revenge that followed. Every choice, every lie, every stolen moment. It all leads to a reckoning you won't forget. Stay with me until the end, because by the time this story is over, you'll see how far someone can go when trust is broken, and how the price of betrayal can echo through every part of a life. You'll never look at love, loyalty, or family the same way again. When I came home from Afghanistan, I thought the hardest part was behind me. I thought silence meant safety. But the silence I found here, inside our small suburban house in Michigan, was different. It wasn't peaceful. It was empty. The clocks ticked too loudly. The fridge hummed like a whisper I couldn't understand. My wife, Linda, barely spoke. Her eyes followed me, but they didn't really see me anymore. I tried to tell myself it was normal. Every veteran struggles with readjustment. But deep down I knew something was off. She used to hug me so tight before deployment that I could barely breathe. Now her touch was soft, polite, as if I were a guest overstaying my welcome. I spent nights sitting on the porch with a beer, watching the quiet street. I remembered nights overseas, when explosions painted the sky and fear had a heartbeat. That fear at least was honest. At home, fear wore lipstick and smiled through dinner. The first time I caught her lying, it wasn't about anything big. She said she'd gone to the grocery store. But when I checked the car, there was no bag, no receipt. Just her perfume, heavy and sweet, like something trying to cover rot. I wanted to ask. I didn't. Veterans learn to measure silence. Sometimes words explode louder than bullets. Every morning, I found her scrolling her phone, smiling faintly. She'd hide the screen when I walked by. My therapist told me not to jump to conclusions. You need to rebuild trust, Jake, he said. But trust, once cracked, makes noise every time you touch it. I started fixing things around the house. Fence, sink, the damn garage door that never closed right. I needed to feel useful again. But she never noticed. One evening, I found her humming a song I didn't recognize. It wasn't the kind of music we listened to. It was his kind of song. My brother Matt's. The one who left college to chase fame with a guitar and too much charm. Matt's got a concert next week, she said casually over dinner. We should go support him. I looked up from my plate. We, she smiled. He's your brother, Jake. Don't be weird. That night, when she fell asleep, I stared at the ceiling, tracing cracks in the plaster like battle lines. In Afghanistan, I'd learned how to spot danger long before it appeared. A shifted shadow, a silent radio, a door left open. At home, danger came dressed in familiar faces. And I realized the war wasn't over. It had just changed uniforms. Matt Carter. He always knew how to make people love him. When we were kids, he'd stand on the porch with our father's old guitar and sing until the neighbors clapped. Even when he hit the wrong notes, everyone laughed and said, he's got something. And he did. He had charm, confidence, that effortless way of turning any room into his stage. I had discipline, scars, and silence. While I was crawling through sand and dust halfway across the world, he was lighting up bars and clubs, singing about love and heartbreak he'd never actually felt. But America loves a pretty liar. When I came back, he was already local famous. Radio interviews, billboards in town, women screaming his name. Even Linda. She used to tease me that I never danced, that I never sang to her like Matt does on stage. She didn't mean it to hurt. At least that's what I told myself. But every joke carries a bit of truth. The night of his concert, the city felt alive. Lights, laughter, the smell of cheap beer and perfume. Linda looked different that evening. More alive than I'd seen her in months. Her hair was perfect, her makeup subtle but sharp. She wore a red dress she hadn't worn in years. For me, maybe once. For him, tonight. We walked backstage after the show. Matt hugged me first. Loud, confident, full of that easy warmth people mistook for sincerity. Jake, The man himself. My brother. The hero. His words echoed, fake and bright. Linda blushed when he kissed her cheek. I watched her smile linger a second too long. Her hand rested on his arm, and his eyes dropped, just for a moment, to her collarbone. It was a small thing, but soldiers are trained to notice small things. They laughed about old times. Matt told a story about me fixing his car before his first gig. "You've always been the dependable one," he said. "The strong one." I smiled. He had no idea how weak those words made me feel. The bar was crowded later, the after-party filled with faces I didn't recognize. Music blasted, drinks poured, and everyone wanted to be near Matt. Linda moved through the crowd like she belonged there. She laughed at every joke he told, brushed against him in ways that looked accidental but weren't. At one point, she leaned in close, whispering something in his ear. His hand touched her back for a heartbeat too long. That's when something inside me went cold. I didn't make a scene. I didn't say a word. I just watched, observed, memorized every move, every glance. It's strange, the way betrayal begins. It doesn't arrive like a storm. It seeps in, slow and quiet, until you realize the water's already rising and you're standing in it, waist deep, pretending it's just rain. As the night went on, I noticed Linda growing distant, restless. Her laughter turned nervous, her hand trembling slightly when she touched her drink. When I asked if she was okay, she said, "I'm just tired. Maybe I should go home." Before I could answer, Matt stepped in. "I can take her," he said. "I'm sober, man. You stay and enjoy yourself." It sounded reasonable. It always does at first. I nodded, forced a smile and said, "Sure. Thanks, bro." As they walked away, her red dress shimmered under the neon lights. I watched until the door closed behind them. Then something old and instinctive woke up inside me. The same gut feeling that saved me more than once overseas. It whispered, "Follow them." And I did. I waited 5 minutes before I left the bar. Enough time for them to think I was staying. Enough time for my heartbeat to settle into that slow, steady rhythm I remembered from combat. Outside, the night air was sharp, the kind that burns a little when you breathe too fast. The neon sign from the bar flickered red against the puddles, painting the street like blood in water. I saw Matt's black Chevy pull out of the lot, Linda in the passenger seat. Her window was half down, her hair catching the wind. She looked peaceful, maybe even happy. I followed from a distance. No headlights, just instinct. They drove past the edge of town, past the gas station, past the place where streetlights ended and the road went quiet. It felt too familiar, like every dark road I'd ever taken with a gun in my hands. Only this time, the enemy wasn't out there. It was in front of me. They turned left onto Route 9. That road didn't lead to our house. It led to the old highway motel near the lake, cheap rooms, peeling paint, and broken signs that still buzzed with half-dead light. I parked behind a truck and watched their car disappear into the lot. Matt got out first. He looked around once, then opened her door. She didn't resist. She smiled. That smile, I'd seen it before, but never meant for me. The two of them walked to room 12. He opened it like he'd done it before. The door closed, the light flickered on inside, and I just sat there, watching, breathing, feeling the pulse in my temples throb like war drums. I didn't rush in, didn't shout, didn't break anything. Instead, I took out my phone. I zoomed in on the glowing window, and I filmed. Through the thin curtain, their silhouettes moved. A hand, a shoulder, then her head tilting back, the kind of tilt I remembered from better days. My stomach clenched so hard I could barely breathe. It was almost clinical the way I watched, detached, like observing an ambush from a distance, waiting for the right moment, calculating angles, light, escape routes. At one point I laughed, quietly, not because it was funny, but because it was unreal. My wife, my brother, my home life collapsing in a $39 motel room with a buzzing fluorescent bulb. When it was over, I didn't move. I stayed there for almost an hour, The world outside was silent except for the sound of the neon vacancy sign humming like a dying wasp. Finally, I started the engine and drove home. No music, no thoughts, just that image replaying in my mind. Linda's hand gripping his shoulder like she used to hold mine. At home, I left the lights off, sat on the floor with a bottle of bourbon and my phone on the table. The video played again and again until the battery died. At 3 a.m., I texted her, "Hope you're feeling better." She didn't reply. When dawn crept through the blinds, I was still sitting there, the taste of smoke and metal on my tongue. Somewhere outside, a dog barked. Somewhere inside, something inside me broke, quietly, like a branch under snow. And I realized, the war had followed me home. Morning came like a lie. The sunlight poured through the blinds, soft and unassuming. But every beam felt sharp, like it was cutting through my chest. I didn't sleep. Not really. I'd sat on the floor until the bourbon ran dry, staring at the empty corner where she should have been. When she finally walked in, the house smelled faintly of her perfume. Sweet, too familiar. My stomach twisted. "Jake," she said softly, almost like a question. I didn't answer. She moved into the kitchen, pouring herself a cup of coffee. Her hands trembled slightly. I noticed everything. The way her fingers lingered on the mug. The way her eyes darted, avoiding mine. "Last night, I wasn't feeling well," she continued. Her voice sounded rehearsed. Sick, vulnerable, perfect. I watched her, quiet. Inside me something stirred. Not anger, not yet. Something sharper, like ice sliding along a blade. "You weren't feeling well?" I said slowly, my voice even. "And Matt had to drive you home?" She flinched. "Yeah, he was just helping. You know how he is. Always trying to—" Her words faltered. I didn't let her finish, because I already knew. She sat down, avoided my gaze, and waited for a response. The silence was heavy, pressing against the walls, filling every room like smoke. I poured my own coffee, not to drink it, just to keep my hands busy. She sighed, small and defeated. "I'm sorry, Jake. I didn't mean for it to happen. It just—" I stood. Slowly, I walked over to the window and looked out, not at her. "I watched everything," I said. No emotion, no shout, just fact. And in that fact, the weight of all the years we'd shared collapsed silently. She gasped softly. What are you talking about?" I turned to face her, my eyes calm, but burning with something she would never understand. "I followed you last night. Route 9, motel by the lake, room 12. Her face went pale. She dropped her mug, and it shattered on the tile. The shards scattered like our life together. It's not what it looked like," she started. I held up my hand, stopping her words. "I don't want your excuses." I watched. I filmed. I remember every move, every laugh, every touch. Her knees buckled slightly. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She just stared, as if she had no idea how the person she betrayed could still be standing in front of her. Controlled, quiet, and sharper than any bullet I'd ever faced. Then she said, almost whispering, I'm sick, Jake. I didn't want to hurt you." And for a moment, I felt a strange, cold clarity. I could have screamed. I could have thrown her out. I could have done 1,000 things that would have made the pain visible. But I didn't. Instead, I sat across from her, unmoving, watching. The betrayal wasn't just about her. It was about everything: my trust, my blood, my brother, the home I came back to. I thought about the ring on the dresser, our wedding photos, the life we built. Everything was gone. And yet I wasn't breaking. Not yet. Because revenge, I realized, didn't start with anger. It started with patience. I finished my coffee. She didn't move. Outside, the sun rose. But inside, the darkness lingered, like smoke that wouldn't leave. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was worried. Not because I was hoping. I didn't sleep because I knew what I had to do. I drove silently, headlights off, following the same road as before. The streets were empty, save for the occasional passing car or barking dog. The wind carried the faint smell of wet asphalt and something metallic. Blood, maybe, or just the memory of it. When I reached the motel, my heartbeat was steady, controlled, precise, like I was about to enter another mission, one that required observation rather than engagement. The neon sign flickered above, buzzing quietly. Vacancy. The hum sounded like a warning. I parked 2 rows behind a rusted truck and sat in the darkness. The Chevy pulled in shortly after, Matt driving, Linda beside him. The room number was the same, 12. The door opened, he stepped out first, then her. I watched, focusing, not breathing too loudly, not moving a muscle. Through the thin curtain I could see them. The light inside was weak, buzzing, but enough to reveal what I needed. He touched her shoulder. She leaned in, laughed softly, a sound I thought I'd never hear again except for moments of joy long past. Her hand traced the line of his neck, his hand brushing the curve of her waist. I wanted to look away. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to shout, to smash something. But soldiers learn that sometimes you survive by watching. You survive by knowing. Their faces were so close, her lips barely inches from his. The motion of betrayal unfolded quietly, deliberately, and I captured every second on my phone. I remembered the nights overseas, the fear, the gunfire, the chaos. Nothing had prepared me for this calm destruction, for a love reduced to shadows behind a motel curtain. I didn't take my eyes off them. Time seemed to stretch, the buzzing light flickering over their forms. I saw her laugh at something he whispered, the soft tilt of her head, the brush of hair against his chest. It was precise, clinical, and it was mine to remember. I sat there for an hour watching the dance of betrayal, not moving, not interrupting. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I only observed, because I understood something then that I couldn't before. This wasn't just about them. It was about me, about the life I thought I had, about trust shattered irreparably. Eventually, they separated. She left first and he followed minutes later. I waited in the darkness until the car disappeared. Then I drove home slowly, the silence in the cab louder than the buzzing neon ever could be. When I arrived, the house was quiet. Too quiet. I didn't sleep that night either. I sat at the kitchen table, looking at our wedding photos, at the ring, at the empty spaces where our life should have been. I realized then, fully, that some wounds aren't healed by time or distance. Some wounds require action. And that's when I began planning. The next morning, the house was empty. Not in the usual way when she's gone for work or running errands. This was a vacuum. A silence so loud it pressed against my skull, making the air itself feel heavy. I poured coffee into a mug, watched it steam, and thought about how easy it had been to betray me. Not just by her, but by everyone I trusted. By my own blood. Matt, Linda, the life I believed in, gone. I tried calling her, texted. Nothing. The messages sat there, unread, like ghosts floating in the digital void. I went through the house room by room, like a soldier checking the perimeter. The living room untouched, the bedroom in disarray, but not from chaos, just absence. No sign of remorse, no sign of guilt, only a void. I looked at the ring on the dresser. Gleaming metal, a circle that used to mean eternity. Now it was just a weight. I picked it up, turned it over in my hands. The thought of giving it back, or letting her keep it, made my stomach twist. I went outside. The morning was crisp, almost cheerful, but the beauty of it made me feel darker inside. Birds chirped, the sun rose, and I realized that life continued, indifferent to betrayal. I sat in the driveway, thinking about what I wanted. Revenge? Justice? Closure? I realized I wanted control. I wanted to take back the pieces of my life that had been stolen while I fought for something bigger than myself. I began to plan carefully, not out of rage, not with blind anger, but with precision. I would make them feel the absence of trust, the weight of betrayal, the cold calculation of consequences. Every call unanswered, every message ignored, added fuel to the fire. Every memory of her smile, her touch, her laughter with Matt, became a sharpened tool in my mind. I didn't sleep for days. Not because I couldn't, but because I didn't want to. I rehearsed scenarios, mentally tracing their movements, their patterns. I imagined the shock on their faces when the life they took for granted began to crumble. By the 5th day, I felt a strange calm. It wasn't peace. It was control. The quiet before the storm. And in that calm, I realized that the war I had survived overseas was nothing compared to the battlefield waiting inside my home. Because this time there were no sides, only consequences. She came back in the late afternoon, like nothing had happened. The door opened, and I heard the soft click of her heels against the floor, the faint rustle of her dress. The smell of perfume clung to her like a second skin. "Jake?" she called, voice light, almost cheerful. I didn't answer. She stepped into the kitchen. "You're home," she said, eyes searching mine. I sat at the table, coffee in hand, my expression unreadable. Nothing gave away what I knew. I thought maybe I could rest here for a while," she said. "Rest? In our house? After last night?" Her words stumbled, fumbling for an excuse. She was trying, but she had no idea how transparent she was. I remembered the motel, the red dress, the laugh, the whispered words. Every detail burned itself into my mind. "I'm glad you're feeling better," I said finally. My voice was steady, cold. No anger, no plea, just fact. She froze. Her eyes widened slightly, and she took a step back. What do you mean?" she asked, a tremor in her voice. I didn't rise from my seat. I didn't need to. My presence, calm and deliberate, carried weight. "I mean," I said slowly, "that I know everything." Her lips parted. No words came out. I placed my hands on the table. Open. Empty. "You didn't think I'd follow? Or see? Or remember?" Tears welled up in her eyes. She tried to speak again, but I silenced her with a look. Not a threatening look. Not a pleading one. Just certainty. "You're here, acting like nothing happened," I continued. "But you know what? You've already destroyed what we had. There's nothing left for you to fix here." She sank into a chair across from me, hands trembling. Jake, I didn't want." "Stop," I said softly. The word carried more weight than shouting ever could. "I don't want your apologies. I don't want excuses. I don't want lies. I want reality. And reality," I paused, letting it settle like a weight in the room, "is that I saw everything." For a moment she was silent. Her face went pale. Her eyes darted to the ring, then to the photos on the wall. Every reminder of our life together. Gone. I leaned back, crossing my arms. "I've watched this unfold for days. And now," I said almost gently, "you're going to experience the consequences of your choices." Her lips quivered. She didn't scream, didn't plead. She just stared, finally realizing that the person she betrayed was not broken. Not angry in the way she expected, but patient. I wanted her to understand that this wasn't about revenge in the moment. It was about a slow, deliberate reckoning, the kind that leaves scars far deeper than any moment of violence ever could. She didn't speak again, and that silence, heavier than any words, was the first victory. I called him on a Thursday, the kind of thin, gray Thursday that feels like punishment. He answered on the second ring, voice bright and smooth, as if the world owed him an encore. "Jake, man, what's up? Long time." I listened to him talk about a new gig, about fans, about things I used to care about, and I felt something like nausea. It wasn't just that he'd betrayed me. It was the ease with which he moved through the world afterward, as if consequences were for other people. When I told him to meet me at his favorite diner, he laughed and said, "Sure, bro. I'll be there in 20 minutes later, I was sitting across from him, watching him lick syrup off his fingers like every small pleasure came without weight. He looked at me with that familiar grin, the one that used to get him out of trouble when we were kids, and for a second I wanted to hate him with a single roaring fire. But I didn't. I sat quiet, measuring him like a man checks a target before he shoots. "You look good," he said genuinely with that lazy charm. "You've been living well." I replied. My voice was calm. I let the words hang between us. He shrugged. You know how it goes. People like what I do. I thought of Linda's laugh, the way she leaned into him in the light of that motel. I tasted that laugh like metal at the back of my throat. So why did you take her to that motel? I asked, straightforward, watching his face for a flinch. He chewed his toast, unfazed. What? We were talking, man. She was upset. I was helping. His answer was a practice thing, smooth, plausible. He expected it to settle like dust. You're my brother, I said. You should have known better. He looked at me for the first time without the showman's sparkle. For a moment, something like guilt crossed his face, quick and shallow. Jake, man, it's complicated, he said. You weren't here. Things happened. I wanted to slap him. I wanted to make him feel the hollow where loyalty used to sit. But those were cheap satisfactions. Instead, I watched him. I catalogued his gestures, the way his fingers drummed anxiety, the small tremor when he smiled too long. You made a choice, I said. You made a choice with my wife, with my life. That's not something you fix with a song or a show. He swallowed. The diner's fluorescent light threw his face into sharp planes. He looked smaller, suddenly like a boy who'd been caught stealing pie. You're making this bigger than it is, he muttered. We didn't. We did, I interrupted. You did. There was silence. The waitress refilled our coffee, oblivious to the fracture she sat between. I wanted him to fear me, but not in the way a punch forces a cry. I wanted him to understand that everything he'd built could be unstitched by truth. So I told him, softly, what I had on my phone. The motel footage, the timestamps, the little details he hadn't thought to hide. He went white, and for the first time the showman's mask slipped. He tried denial, then blame, then the old charm, but each tactic landed on me like a dull stone. You could have done anything you wanted, he said finally, voice small. But you picked her. And you picked him? I answered, thinking of Linda's hands tracing the line of his jaw. He looked at me like he expected me to explode, but I only placed my palms flat on the table and counted to 10 in my head. Listen, he said. I can fix this. I'll talk to people. I'll fix. I laughed, quietly. There is no fixing. There's only consequence. He swallowed hard, and for a second I saw the boy who used to hide behind my jacket in thunderstorms, the one I taught to tie his shoes and stand up. I didn't mean to hurt you, he whispered, and that was honest, in its way, a confession without courage. I left the diner without another word. Walking away, I felt the dissipation of something awful and heavy, like a wound finally beginning to coagulate. But I also felt the chill of a plan forming, not to destroy for the pleasure of it, but to reorder what he'd broken. Brotherhood might have been a shrine for him once, but for me it had become a ledger, and I intended to balance it. Revenge, I learned, tastes like patience. It doesn't sing. It waits. It doesn't explode. It corrodes. In the days after confronting Matt, I moved like a man building a trap. Not with hammers and bricks, but with small, precise actions that would ripple and become impossible to ignore. I knew the world he lived in. Small-town radio, local promoters, fans who loved the image more than the song. That was his weakness. He had a brand, and a brand could be unstitched. I started quietly. First, I reached out to people who mattered in ways he wouldn't suspect. The club owners who booked him, the blogger who had once written a flattering piece, the journalist who liked quick scandals. I didn't threaten. I didn't ask for violence. I offered truth, and truth is persuasive. I sent the motel footage to a private email. No captions, no drama, just timestamps and the raw file. The attachments spoke a language louder than any accusation. People opened them. Phones buzzed. Conversations started. A promoter replied within hours, cold and efficient. We need to talk. Then I turned toward his sponsors, the small brands that loved his face. I sent them quiet notes, links to clips, a timeline, a clean explanation. I didn't smear him with rumors. I gave them evidence and let them make decisions for their profit margins. The first booking fell through without fanfare. The club said, scheduling conflict. The sponsor sent a terse email terminating a contract effective immediately. Each cancellation was tiny, but together they sounded like a falling building. I watched his publicity unravel not with joy, but with a clinical focus. This was not about cruelty. It was about balance. He had taken my life and had the audacity to keep his. I only wanted the ledger to read even. Then I did something harsher. I reached out to people who mattered to Linda. Her friends, a neighbor who liked to gossip, a woman from the yoga class she attended. I sent them the same file. I didn't add commentary. People drew their own conclusions. Rumors spread because humans love to fill silences. In a town of small social circles, a single rumor is a match near dry tinder. Invitations stopped arriving at our doorstep. Texts went unanswered. She began to feel the shape of absence in public. Word reached Matt faster than I expected. He called me once, late, desperate, asking what I wanted. I told him what I wanted with a voice as flat as a winter sky. Accountability. He begged to fix it. But there is no fixing when the public unseats you. You can apologize to those you wronged privately, but the marketplace of reputation doesn't accept sorrow as currency. As his shows emptied, I watched his face in video clips online. Confused, smaller, the charm falling off him like old paint. Fans posted questions. Others posted links. The momentum compounded. I didn't gloat. I observed the consequences with the outsider's calm of a man who'd survived worse. Meanwhile, I filed the papers. The divorce documents arrived at our house like a postal verdict. I left the ring on the kitchen table where she would see it, a cold metal circle that had been our promise. The papers were clean, precise. No melodrama, just the laws in different language. I signed where needed and served them when she was home, the motion a formal hammer on what had already been broken. When she realized she would lose not only love but social refuge, her face changed. The entitlement drained from it and left fear. She started leaving the lights on, as if illumination could keep gossip at bay. Didn't. I could have exposed them with a viral post, a public spectacle that would drain them both dry in hours, but I withheld that kind of theater. My revenge was a slower burn, discreet, impossible to completely hide from the world they relied on. I wanted them to live with the consequences in the small, surviving details. Cancelled gigs, fewer calls, awkward silences at family events, a dwindling number of friends willing to risk the fallout. One night, Matt showed up at my door, ragged and nearly speechless. He wanted to fight. He wanted to reclaim what he'd lost. I let him stand there filming his own anger into my hallway light, and then I shut the door. Not with violence, but with the finality of someone who had set the world right in his way. They called me a villain in local threads. Some applauded me, others thought I'd gone too far. It didn't matter. I had expected the noise. Noise is the price of consequence. Truth will always create more sound than comfort. People assumed I sought humiliation for the sake of it. They were wrong. I wanted realignment, not spectacle. I wanted honesty to cost them what they'd taken from me. A future without shame-free smiles. As the weeks went on, I felt a strange hollow fill with something like clarity. The rage that had burned was cooler now, sharper. It no longer red with heat but bright with purpose. Linda came to me one evening, eyes hollow, voice thin. "Jake, please," she said. "Can we talk? I can explain." I let her speak and listened to the hollow explanations she offered, the tired lines of someone trying to stitch back fabric with the wrong thread. None of it reached the wound. "You both made choices," I said. "Choices have ripples." I left it at that. There was no need to hammer the point further. She could see the erosion with her own senses. The town learned the story in crumbs. Whispers at the grocery store, comments on a radio feed, a drunken confession to a bartender. It was never neat. It was messy and human and unforgiving. And through it all, I kept my hands clean of anything that would land me in a cell. There's a kind of revenge that demands you break the law. There's another that asks only that you be cleverer with truth than your enemies are with lies. I chose the latter. Months later, Matt played a smaller venue with a half-hearted crowd. He sounded tired on stage. I watched a clip from a distance and felt an absence where I had expected satisfaction. The victory I'd built was not a celebration, it was a recalibration. In the quiet after the storm, I realized revenge had given me something I hadn't planned for: perspective. I had traded a life of denial for a life of ownership. I had reclaimed the narrative of who I was, and in doing so, I had learned how brittle the things we take for granted truly are. Revenge, in the end, did not bring back the past. It didn't fix the memory of a laugh or the warmth of a true touch. It rearranged the future so that they couldn't make the same choices in the same way. That, to me, was enough. The house was quiet when she returned that night. I didn't speak. I didn't move. The papers were already on the table, the ring beside them, a silent punctuation to everything that had come before. She walked in, her steps hesitant. Her eyes flicked to the table, then to me. You did this?" she whispered. I only nodded once. Not proud, not regretful, just truth. Matt had called earlier, begging, pleading, promising change. I ignored him. He had done what he had done. Words now carried no power over the actions that shaped reality. She sank into the couch, trembling. She looked smaller than ever. Her confidence dissolved into quiet desperation. I realized then that the most effective revenge is not loud. It is the realization of absence, the slow burn of understanding that the world no longer bends to your whims. I poured a glass of whiskey, the amber liquid catching the dim light. I didn't drink it. I just held it, a weight in my hand, the same way I held every choice in the days that had led here. The silence stretched. It was heavier than shouting, more dangerous than a fist. She wanted an explanation, a justification, anything to fix the broken world. There wasn't one. I told her softly, "This is what happens when trust is broken. Not with anger, not with rage, but with consequence. You've lived in comfort, in the illusion that betrayal has no cost. You were wrong." Her shoulders shook. She whispered apologies, again and again, but they were empty. They couldn't touch the reality she had created. Outside, the wind pressed against the windows. The lights flickered. The world was indifferent, just as it had been the night I followed them, the night I learned that some wars are waged at home. I walked past her, leaving the room. The apartment felt larger, emptier. I could breathe in ways I hadn't since discovering the truth. And then I realized something I hadn't expected. Revenge is not just for the injured. It is for the living. It restores something inside you that death or betrayal tries to claim. Matt's life continued to crumble quietly. Smaller gigs, skeptical friends, sponsors pulling away. He could no longer rely on charm or talent to escape responsibility. Linda's social circle shifted, too, like leaves carried by wind. People noticed the absence, the change, the subtle consequences that truth brings in small doses. I sat alone for a long time, listening to the quiet house. The war outside was over. The war inside had a victor. It wasn't me. Not entirely. It was the truth. And truth is a sharper weapon than any rifle I ever carried. I poured another glass of whiskey. This one I drank. It burned down my throat, but the pain felt good. It reminded me that I was alive, that I had survived more than betrayal, more than war, more than loss. I looked at the ring one last time. I didn't pick it up. I didn't need it. The lesson it carried was already inside me. The silence in the house became my companion. A quiet acknowledgement that some wounds are irreversible, some truths are permanent, and some victories are measured not in destruction but in clarity. And for the first time in months I felt at peace. Weeks passed. The world outside moved like it always does. Cars honking, people laughing, the sun rising and setting without care for what had happened in my life. Inside, though, the house remained quiet, almost too quiet. Empty spaces spoke louder than voices ever could. I found myself walking through the rooms, touching objects that were once sacred. The coffee mug she had used that morning. The corner of the couch she used to claim. The photo frames lined with smiles that now felt like memories of strangers. Each object whispered stories of what had been and what could never return. I thought about Matt, about his charm, his songs, his ability to twist the world to his favor. I didn't feel satisfaction anymore. that had burned away in the slow heat of consequence. What remained was understanding. Understanding that betrayal leaves a wound, but revenge leaves clarity. Linda came by once, quietly, unsure. Her voice trembled, full of words I didn't need to hear. I let her speak, knowing that the weight of her own choices was a lesson no apology could replace. We didn't reconcile. There was no grand moment of forgiveness. There didn't need to be. The lesson had already taken root. Some things cannot be fixed, only acknowledged. I walked outside into the late afternoon sun. The city moved on. Life was messy, loud, relentless. I felt a strange sense of relief. Survival didn't always come from fighting wars abroad. Sometimes it came from facing them at home, in the quiet spaces where truth resides. I picked up the ring one last time. I didn't keep it. I didn't throw it. I placed it on the windowsill where the sun would hit it and slowly fade into the dust of afternoon light. It was a reminder, not of what was lost, but of what I had reclaimed, myself. And as I watched the light scatter across the room, I realized something crucial. Revenge isn't about destruction. It's about witnessing. It's about seeing clearly, knowing clearly, and surviving with your own integrity intact. So, to anyone watching this story, ask yourself, how many of the betrayals in your life have gone unnoticed? How many choices have you ignored, pretending the world is simpler than it is? And most importantly, when the truth finally comes, will you have the clarity to face it without losing yourself? I walked away from the window. The house felt alive again, not with joy, but with reality. And reality, no matter how harsh, is always worth facing. If this story made you feel the weight of betrayal, the precision of consequence, or the quiet power of truth, share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more stories that reveal the darkness and the clarity hidden in everyday lives, subscribe, because some truths, once witnessed, cannot be unseen.